Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Perfecting Potatoes Together Innovation and Insight webinar. My name is Natalie Wong, and I'm the Marketing Campaign Manager for Potatoes at BASF. I'll be your host today as we explore the cutting-edge innovation, challenges, and exciting opportunities within the potato sector. So whether you're tuning in from the field, the office, or somewhere in between, thank you for joining us. This event brings together industry experts and growers who are all working towards one shared goal, perfecting potatoes together. Over the next hour, we'll hear from a range of speakers. There will also be opportunities for you to get involved, ask questions, and share your perspectives. So please do make sure you make use of the slider function throughout. If you're already subscribed to our Perfecting Potatoes Together newsletter, you might remember that earlier this month I teased an all expenses paid mystery innovation tour. Well, here's another hint. We'll be taking our lucky prize draw winners to Scotland this August. Full details on how to enter will be shared via email in June, so make sure you're subscribed and keep an eye on your inbox. But first, to officially open today's webinar and guide us through the programme, I'm delighted to hand over to our chair for the morning, Rebecca Dawes from Jane Craigie Marketing. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Nat, and a very good morning to everybody joining us for the Perfecting Potatoes Together webinar. It's a particularly special one. It demonstrates the importance of collaboration, and we're delighted to be joined by the James Hutton Institute, GB Potatoes, and our own team at BASF. It's very much an opportunity for you to ask as many questions as you like, and we will do the questions at the end. So do feel free to pop them into the chat at the Q&A box or in the bottom right corner of your screen. My job is to not only keep us on time, but is also to keep our speakers on time. So I'm going to, without further ado, get going. Our very first speaker probably needs no introduction. Many of you will know Dr. David Cook from the James Hutton Institute, but I will give a brief intro and then hand over to David. So David is head of the plant pathology group at the James Hutton Institute and has over 20 years of experience studying potato late blight. He coordinates the Fight Against Blight monitoring, which has been in Britain since 2006, and it's something that he's going to touch on today. So hopefully you'll get lots of wonderful insights. He also coordinates the data collection, analysis and interpretation of the Euro blight population data, which gives British growers a real heads up on the traits of clones of the pathogens emerging in continental Europe. So a big thank you to joining us, David, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca and Natalie. As you'll have seen from my first slide, is an overview from myself and other colleagues at the James Hutton Institute up in Dundee. I can report the potatoes are not looking quite as advanced as those behind me yet. It's awfully dry, and because it's so dry, we thought I'd just, before I embark on blight, the opposite end of the spectrum, just give you a bit of an insight into what we're doing up here at with James Hutton Institute Scientific Services. That includes the commercial sector as well as the institute, on breeding for drought tolerance. So we do have close collaborations with many potato breeders across the UK, and as you'll see from this slide, in other countries as well. So we're doing trialling not only in Scotland but in the south to get an impression of how some of our new breeding lines perform under different circumstances. It tends to be warmer and drier in the south, of course. We work with breeding companies who export to Egypt and Morocco, so knowing how these varieties perform under dry conditions is obviously important. And if you think it's dry here, the picture on the left there shows potatoes doing quite well considering, with date palms in the background. So it's incredibly dry conditions. So I won't go through every single of all the points here, but we do routine assessments of clones and potential varieties in various countries where the conditions are much harsher and drier, and perhaps is what we may be heading to in the future. And lastly, there's a lot of fundamental research up here at James Hutton, led by Tim George, and there's a Root to Res project, for example, which is looking at the fundamentals of roots establishment and surviving under various conditions, but making potatoes much more resilient. Okay, moving on to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk today about Fight Against Blight, and I'm going to talk about the 2024 programme. But I will also touch on what's happening in 2025. So thanks again, as always, to the sponsors of the Fight Against Blight campaign. BASF, of course, being one of those. We appreciate the support from all these companies and agronomists. Next slide, please. And really a stark reminder of the challenges that have been in mainland Europe in the last couple of years. A same potato crop film with photographs taken a couple of weeks apart, and you can see on the 29th of May it was already in a serious state. This is a crop which has been sprayed every 3 to 5 days, so the blight fungicide resistance issues going on here, but also extreme weather, to be fair. And you know, the crop on the right, obviously, that it's completely devastated. So I think that's a stark reminder of how bad it can get if blight gets out of control. Next slide, please. Very, very briefly, what we do is collect samples through yourselves, scouts, people who sign up to monitor fields at the coalface, as it were. They collect those samples and we DNA fingerprint them in the same way as criminal forensics works. So we can actually get a DNA fingerprint of the strain of the pathogen Phytophthora infestans that's causing blight in that field. And we characterize that and publicly map this through Fight Against Blight website to alert you to when blight's active in your area, but also on the Euroblight site, so you can look at those results. And we also use these FTA cards. So these are really important. So if you are collecting samples, then press the lesions onto these cards, and we can directly analyze the DNA on these, and it survives if the post, which can be a problem sometimes in the UK, is delayed and the fresh samples don't make it. At least this dry card does. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, what a contrast. I thought I'd show this slide to remind us of where we were this time, this time last year. At the bottom there, you can see the Met Office anomaly forecasts and the wettest. We came through from the wettest winter to a very wet March, April and May, and samples were already coming in at this stage of the year. As you'll hear later, we have one outbreak so far from a dump in the UK, and things are very different. So it was a challenging season for many. And this just gives a summary of that. Next slide, please. So where did we get to? I'm now introducing the idea of Euroblight as well. This map shows purely where samples came from in 2024. So we had 2,900 samples in total and 37 suppliers. Now the Fight Against Blight were one of those key suppliers. As you can see at the bottom, you sampled, Scout sampled 234 outbreaks, which came up with 1,600 samples and from 70 potato cultivars. And there were many Scouts engaged and almost 1,000 samples we genotyped at the Hutton. Next slide, please. So cutting to the chase in terms of the results from 2024, this is the chart from the Euroblight website of England, Scotland and Wales data. And you can see, I suppose the main thing is that the coloured blocks represent different clones of the potato blight pathogen. And you can see from looking over time that those coloured blocks change over time. So the blight that you're fighting in the field, it does change, and the traits of those clonal lineages are different, and that's the important thing. We don't do this just for fun to make pretty pictures. Really, the blue clone there, which was resistant to metalaxyl, was absolutely dominant in the 2006, 7 and 8. We had to change the way we used metalaxyl, and similarly this pale green one at the top there, which in 2016 and 17 was fluazanam resistant, and we were having serious problems. The industry was having serious problems with tuber blight because of fluazanam wasn't working because of that clone which was resistant. We've defeated that. As you can see, it's reduced to a tiny amount now, so this is good news. But to come back to this year's results, I've highlighted EU36 as the dominant strain at 63% of the population. So, and I'll talk more about that strain later. And EU6 is still there. It's still aggressive. It doesn't have any fungicide resistance issues as far as we know. But that's an important one still. The genotype 13 is declined. EU37 is declined, as I've just mentioned, and the 3 arrows show 3 clones that are not yet present in Europe. And part of the reason for this integration of the European research with the GB research is that these ones are on the horizon. We're keeping a close eye on them for the industry. So EU43, EU45 and EU47, and you'll hear more of those as we go through later. So the next slide, please, shows the European results. And as you can see, there are some similarities, but also some stark differences. And I think one of the main ones here is the proportion of that, I don't know what to call that, teal blue maybe, the genotype EU43, which started in Denmark in 2018, increased in frequency, and one of the main drivers behind that dramatic increase in frequency was the finding of it having resistance to Revus or mandipropamid, the CAA group of fungicides. So that first reared its head in Denmark, and then as it spread through to the Netherlands, the Low Countries, it also became resistant to the active ingredient oxythiopiprolin, which is in Zorvec. And so 2023 was a particularly bad year with high blight pressure and people having to adjust, or the industry having to adjust to resistance within the population to two really key fungicides. So that's one of the main differences there. We've also got that other clone, the purple one at the top, which appeared in 2023. It's a relative of EU43, so it's emerged from that other clone, and it also has resistance to Zorvec, and there are some indications of a lower level of insensitivity to mandipropamid as well within that clone. So a dramatic change, the industry's responded, and as you'll see later in the presentation, it does seem that we've been effective. The change of advice has been effective in reducing the frequency of those populations in 2024. So there is some good news by the industry responding to advice that comes out. Okay, next slide, please. Just briefly, I should have also mentioned the grey bar at the top, which is the sexual population on that previous slide, which is the frequency of the catch-all of all the other samples of the blight pathogen which are not clones, and that is more frequent in mainland Europe than it is in the UK. Okay, so I said I'd come back to EU36. As you can see from the map there, it's pretty dominant, especially across England and across the rest of wider Europe as well. It's been around since 2013, and this year it expanded, and it is aggressive. It can be very difficult to manage, and there are reports of fungicide and host resistance breakdowns if we put it under severe pressure. Now, what I mean by putting it under pressure is if blight of any strain gets out of control in your crop, then it has the potential to mutate and either overcome host resistance or become resistant to a fungicide. So do bear that in mind. Next slide, please. A bit doom and gloom, but okay, so a bit more detail on EU46 and EU43. In 2024, on a European scale, 43 expanded east to Poland, Austria and Serbia. It decreased in most countries, as I just mentioned, and that's the good news. You can see there Germany, a dramatic reduction in Germany in 2024, and similarly in the Netherlands. And that was because of a much more intensive fungicide campaign, awareness of the fact and the need to alternate active ingredients and to mix active ingredients. So yeah, it's been quite challenging, but it does look like there's good news. EU46 is now in 7 countries, and in 2024 it expanded to Wales, Scotland, Poland and Belgium. Now the key thing obviously here for us today is Wales and Scotland. It is a concern that the pathogen has come across into 2 quite distinct areas of the UK. We think that was probably airborne spread. At least there's no other links for those sites that suggests it could have come in any other way than airborne. And the key point here is, if it was very late in the season, the key point here is if this one has arrived through airborne spread, then it seems likely that 43 could have done it as well into other areas that are unsampled on this and shown as unsampled on this map. But we didn't sample very late into the season. So the point to stress here is that early season sampling, clearly it's very dry and we hope there's not blight active at the moment, but early season sampling is going to be important to understand exactly what we're dealing with in 2024. Next slide, please. The other clones, which I won't go into much detail on, EU41. We don't know its traits apart from it being resistant to metalaxyl, but we're just starting to work on that. We've done some fungicide sensitivity testing. We're not aware of other issues with 41, but as you can see, it did increase in frequency in the UK in 2024. And the other clone, EU45, is establishing itself and spreading across large parts of mainland Europe now. And again, because we don't have isolates of that, we don't have much of a feel for the traits, but it's one to keep an eye on. Next slide, please. I'm moving fairly quickly because we're going to run out of time, and I know we will. So also a new clone. Now this is a different story. EU47 has been around in the Netherlands since 2021 and is now found in 3 different countries. So I elevated it from one of the others, the grey bar, to having a named clone status in 2024. It is reported to defeat our genes R8 and R9 specifically, the Dutch groups have recently introduced a set of coloured codes, categories of resistant varieties and which R genes they contain. Now, it's quite clear that from looking at the list of cultivars on which we found this EU47 clone, that it is focused on a specific group, so R8 and R9, and more data will be coming out on that. And it just means that it's alerting us to the fact that resistance can fail in the same way that fungicides, can fail if we put them under pressure. No reported fungicide issues with this clone, but it's something else to bear in mind in the way we combine host resistance to combat blight with fungicides. So the two need to work together and support each other. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a bit of an update on what we're doing with Fight Against Blight. So you can see funding status for the 2025 season. We have redesigned the website completely from scratch. So hopefully for all of you scouts, it'll be much easier to work with. And it works better on a mobile, logging in is much better, etc., etc. We've already got 134 scouts signed up and packs have been sent out. But if you are interested in becoming a Blight Scout, do contact us. And the email address is on the website, which you can see there. Next slide, please. Okay, I've got a few more slides, but I'm not going to go into, looking at the clock, I'm not going to go into these in tremendous detail. So the key point here is there are a lot of fungicides, which is the good news. Next, if you click on. So only a handful of them, or a reasonable panel of them, are effective against blight, which is, again, more good news. But the bad news is, next click, please, is that some of them are being affected. I already mentioned this, so I won't go into more detail. We have resistance, and if as we're aware of problems in some products, that focuses more pressure onto the other categories. So this is why it's important to mix and be careful about the way you use the products in the future. Okay, next click, and yeah, puts more pressure on the remaining ones. Next slide, please. And this is a summary slide, which I'm somehow cautious in using because, but I'll go through this in more detail, and I think we'll leave the detail on the next slides because this is the key one. What I've tried to do here is look at the active ingredients across the top there on the columns, and then clones of blight. And obviously green represents, sorry if there's anyone with green colorblind, I should change the colors probably on this. Green represents things where there's no reported risk yet. And the obviously red is where there have been issues and reported issues. So for example, imidazopyramid there, we know there are strains of EU43 that are fully resistant to it. And EU46, there is some indications that's why that's a different color. Some of the other clones there at the bottom, there have been cases of genetically distinct isolates which also have resistance to that, and that represents, I suppose, misuse of the product to fight infections. And if you put it under pressure, it can break. So it's being aware of that. Similarly with oxythiopyprilin, you can see there are issues there in some cases, but not every isolate of those clones is resistant to that. So it makes it quite a complicated picture to talk about. And that's why my red note up there says the red box indicates resistance has been reported, but doesn't mean that all isolates of that clone are resistant. So it's to give you a guide of where that's been found with those countries. So metalaxyl similarly, fully resistant in EU13, EU41 is fully resistant, and there's some intermediate resistance in EU43 and 46. So that has issues for whether we go back to metalaxyl, for example, and fluazinam, the EU37, the one I mentioned earlier. The others, the resistance is non-UK isolates. That's important. Okay, if we move on quickly, and I'm just going to give us a very quick summary of each of those, the next slides as we go through them. I've covered most of this in 2025. We'll be testing amisulveron and EU41 because of some concerns, but we're doing more of this testing through the fight against blight, and that's the key point. And we'll be responsive and keep you informed as the industry as we go through the season. Next slide, please. And click again, please. And this just shows you that we can test with the DNA from those FTA cards, so that's quite important. We can now look for the individual DNA mutations which confer resistance, and we'll be doing that. Next slide, please. And so this is oxythiopyprilin. Again, I'm not going to go to the detail. No risks in 2024, apart from those two isolates of EU46, which came in late in the season, so we need to be very aware of that. If you just click on that, shows what resistance looks like, full resistance. And click on to the next slide, please. And similarly for imidapropamid, and if you could just click again, that shows the animation. Imidapropamid, again, within the UK, we haven't seen resistance as yet. There's the tests over the years. That's a very low EC50s, but when you do get resistance, it doesn't work at all. So it's really an on-off switch. So again, we have to be very careful of that for 2025. Next slide, please. Propamacarb, pleased to say no issues on that one. So that's easy. Next slide. And Cyazofamid, we indicated some minor differences here at very low doses. So we're not anywhere near field rate, but the fact that there are clone-specific differences in sensitivity may, for example, explain why EU41 has appeared in some cases. So again, that's one we're keeping an eye on and we're in discussions with the companies, as we always do. Next slide, please. So we're almost there, and just skip on. That's just showing the differences there. So some conclusions to wrap up. I hope you'll agree that knowledge on the evolving populations is important, and 2024 fungicide programs were very intense, but they were effective. The CAAs, 43 has not yet been sampled in the UK, but let's keep an eye on it. Oxythiopyprolin, we know it's there, and we have to be aware of EU46 and whether it spreads now it's in the UK. Yeah, the good news story on fluazanam, that we've kept it. By being aware and changing of use, the product is still there in the armory for you to use managing blight. So next slide, next one. Metalaxyl, yeah, just again, we know it has great potential. It's a good product, it's systemic, but we need to be aware of the cultivar, the cases in which it's used. Cultivar resistance is increasingly important, but watch out for this EU47 I mentioned. And last one is, don't forget primary inoculum. I mean, blight's got to come from somewhere. That's the key message. Get rid of those dumps, look out for volunteers, and in some cases, watch out for oospores. That's fortunately not such a big problem in the UK as it is in continental Europe. Okay, and last slide is just thanks. So again, that's the 2025 sponsors, 18 of them. Thank you all for that sponsorship, and thank you for listening. And I hope that wasn't too quick, and I'm sure there'll be time for questions later. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. That was excellent, and a lot in there in a short space of time. So thank you for working your magic and getting through it so quickly. And certainly you mentioned about being very responsive and also the importance of knowledge, and certainly this campaign has been hugely helpful for the industry. So big thank you to you too for all the work that you do. So next up, we are going to Alex Godfrey. Alex is a director in his own family growing business with potatoes, pre-pack, crisping and seed. He's with us today as chair of the GB Potatoes Group, which we're going to find out a little bit more about and how it can help you in the future. So Alex, over to you. Oh, I think you're just on mute there, Alex.
Basic error, sorry. Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning, everybody. I thought I'd start, as this slide says, with a very brief history of GB Potatoes, how we got to where we are. We were launched in October 2022 after many months of planning after the levy vote that occurred towards the end of 2020. There was a recognition amongst a group of growers and others in the industry that we needed some kind of industry body to fill some of the gaps that would have been left were AHDB to leave the potato sphere, which obviously it did. Mark Taylor chaired GB Potatoes for its first 2 years, and then, as he'd always intended, he stood down at the end of last year, and hence I've stepped into his shoes. So we'll start our 4th membership year later this year in August, and I think that shows we have got ground under our feet. We are a viable organisation into the future. If I could have the next slide, please. So our board covers all sectors of the potato industry and has a good geographical spread as well. I won't list everybody who's on it, but you can see the names there for yourselves. We are very well aware as a board that what growers in particular and others in the industry really don't want to see from any organisation is heavy bureaucracy and inefficiency, and we are very committed to not having that. We definitely don't. We have an excellent executive team, 2 part-time individuals who get through a lot on behalf of GB Potatoes and the industry, Scott and Graham. If I could have the next slide, please. So what have we been up to since we were formed? We've got a lot of things on. Here's just a flavour of some of them. So we, in partnership with CupGrow, established the GB PCN forum. This is a group that brings together experts to discuss how we manage PCN across the industry, creating a cohesive strategy. The most tangible output of that project is the very recently published Grower Guide, which has been significantly updated from previous guides and now includes I'm sorry, I've lost the word off the but it's a very comprehensive guide written by Matt Back and Kasia Dibble at Harper Adams. That's available to members of GB Potatoes and Cupgrower through the relevant parties' websites, and there will be a summary guide also being published in the next couple of weeks, which will be made more widely available to industry as a taster of that guide. We've also taken over the chairing and administration of the National Virus Forum. This is a group that's met since there were some fairly significant issues with virus in 2019-20. As I say, we're facilitating that group. We are carrying forward the actions that that group decides needs to happen when it meets, and including in this year, we're establishing a technical working group to properly bring together our understanding of an industry, of what is known, what isn't known, as the pathogens develop, as the hosts and the vectors develop within the industry, and that will give us a platform, we hope, to understand what further research is needed, and in turn, with appropriate funding, which isn't in place yet, to commission that research. We've also taken on engagement with both government, so we have regular channels of communication with DEFRA and the Scottish Government, and also with other bodies within the industry through a regular stakeholder group meeting. We frequently talk to BPTA, NFU, NFUS, and the PPA. I'm often asked, it's often presented to me as if it's a choice. Why do we need GB Potatoes if we've got these other industry bodies? Well, the fact is we all understand that we're covering different things. We talk to each other, we make sure there isn't duplication, and actually within the industry there is space for all of us and a need for all of us. Further to that, we're also increasingly recognised by journalists as the voice of the industry. That's one of the things that perhaps we are a better place to do than some of the other industry bodies. We can provide that authoritative, reasonable comment, whether it's to trade press or national papers on any industry on any issue that arises. On top of that, we've got our on top of that, we've got our website has recently been redeveloped, and we're issuing regular newsletters to our members and news briefs to anybody in the industry who's interested. If you would like to be signed up to our news briefs, then please do visit our website, and there's a facility there to sign up. Just to mention a couple of other things in the offering that didn't fit onto the slide, we are fairly well advanced with setting up a next generation group, so we hope to launch this in the next couple of months. We will be looking to invite applications from young people across the industry, or sorry, people entering the industry or with a few years experience in the industry, and we will look to take them around various businesses and give them experience, show them what's going on elsewhere in the industry. So if you can't get on to the tour that Nat was referring to in her introduction, and you're fairly new into the industry, there is another avenue through GB Potatoes to come and do that. Okay, next slide, please. So we are conscious that we need to represent all areas of the industry, though. We have established so far 2 consultation groups to give us a particular focus. The Seed Consultation Group, chaired by Tony Bambridge, works closely with SPO, BPTA and the PBGA, Pre-Basic Growers Association, in both English and Scottish seed. That will bring any areas of attention required in the seed industry to the board, and fill in any gaps that we might have as a board where we need that extra expertise. More recently this year, we've also established a fresh sector consultation group. those of you who were familiar with the Fresh Potato Suppliers Association, that was a body to represent the interests primarily of packers. That organisation was also chaired by Mark Taylor, but it was wound up earlier this year. Consequently, we've set up the Fresh Sector Consultation Group to provide that voice for those fresh sector packers, but we also welcome anybody else involved in the fresh trade, including in particular we're trying to focus on those selling bagged potatoes into chip shops, to join in that Fresh Sector Consultation Group, have the chance to voice their views and highlight what they think we need to address. Next slide, please. So one of the large areas of work that did take quite a lot of setting up and has been, I think, relatively well publicised is the residual levy funds. These are our levies. This is our money that we paid into AHDB, but was left there when that organisation, when AHDB Potatoes ceased to function. After quite a lot of work, we have secured those funds for the industry. The initial tranche is £1.3 million, which we'll receive over the next 3 years. We've already received the first tranche of it. There is hopefully a bit more to come after that, but it is dependent on the final accounting by AHDB and them checking that there's no other liabilities coming out of the woodwork. So those funds we secured specifically to spend on 7 projects. This was a limitation we had to accept in order to be able to access the funds. So if I could ask for the next slide, please. So the first of those, I will run through them each quickly, is potato blight. And obviously David's already talked about Fight Against Blight. And you will have seen GB Potatoes there as one of the sponsors of the 2025 Fight Against Blight. I'm going to choose my words slightly carefully because I don't want to imply, I don't want to talk down any of the other sponsors. They're all incredibly valuable and we're very grateful for what they do. But I think it's fair to say in 2025, GB Potatoes will be providing a significant portion of the funding to secure Fight Against Blight. And that in turn, I think, takes some of the pressure off the other sponsors because then they're able to direct their funds where they think most appropriate. And actually, it's good both for blight and other projects within the industry. Aphid monitoring, the second project, which was initially aimed at making sure the yellow water trap project continues. That's proving a little bit harder to put into practice, but those talks are still ongoing, and we're looking at other options as well to try to make sure that we have good aphid monitoring, good robust aphid monitoring in place across the UK. The third strand of the funding was for management tools to combat viruses. So this does link into the National Virus Forum and the technical working group we've established. But as an organisation, we've also joined the HCP, which is Horticultural Crop Protection, on behalf of the potato seed sector. And that will, the function of that is to apply for emergency approvals where they're appropriate and where they would be beneficial in the seed sector. So we're also establishing a technical working group there to monitor what emergency approvals would be useful and assess what it is worth us spending further industry funds, which are available to do this, on getting those emergency approvals. If I could have the next slide, please. The fourth strand of the project was for reputational management for the industry, which includes dealing with crises, and includes press engagement, social media engagement with stakeholders. Unfortunately, I can't quite reveal the name of our successful bidder, but we have completed the tender process and we have appointed a marketing agency to work with us. But that work, the contract is being finalised currently, and we hope to be able to announce that in the next week or so. The fifth, get my numbers right, fifth project is the bridging information gaps. So further to the demise of the levy, we know we are now operating in a bit of a vacuum where it comes to information on planted area, as well as on yield and price, which are harder to obtain. This is another project that's proving quite challenging to get off the ground, and we are still looking at a number of options for what we can do on this. And the final two projects, CIPC residue monitoring, Obviously, CIPC was withdrawn back in 2019. We are still required as an industry by CRD to monitor our produce in store for traces of CIPC to check that we are remaining under the temporary MRL. If we don't submit sufficient samples, and they require 125 samples every year of product that's been in store for more than 2 months in a store that had historically been treated with CIPC, there is a danger that the temporary MRL may be reduced. So this is really important that as an industry we do pull together and get these samples in so they can be tested, and we have the evidence base to make sure we can continue using those stores that might have residue levels that are just a bit below the temporary MRL. And finally, if I could have the next slide, please. We are also the final element of the residual levy funds project is to update RB209 as it relates to potatoes. There have been no updates for the last 4 years. We have a technical working group in place that is making good progress and will make recommendations to the central RB209 steering group on any changes that should be made for potatoes. And if I can have the final slide, please. So I've talked quite a bit about the residual levy funds. It sounds like quite a lot of money, but obviously at an industry level, 1.3 million, even if we get the other 400,000 afterwards, which I think we will, is not going to go that far, and those funds will run out. So it's absolutely vital that we as GB Potatoes have the support of the industry so we can keep the projects that need to keep going after those funds run out. So we need the support of our members. We're hugely grateful for those members who are supporting us, but this is a call to everybody else who isn't. Please don't assume that the work will be done. We need participation. We do need you to join us. We have a good spread across growers, packers, processors, trade and associate members. The merchant category is new, that's still developing, but members across all areas are most welcome. And please do visit our website to find out how you join up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. And what an amazing amount of work in a very short period of time, really, over the last 4 years, but very much looking forward to seeing how these 7 projects develop. And thank you for that insight. I'm sure there'll be some interesting questions that come at the end. So our final speaker is known to many of you, and earlier on we were laughing about what I would introduce him as, potato legend, Mr. Potato. I'm not quite sure what Paul's title is, but Paul Goddard, as many of you will know, is BASF's Business Development Manager for Specialities. He's worked in the sector for over 30 years, so has an incredible wealth of knowledge and experience. And today is going to talk you through some of the amazing innovations that are on offer to help with your potato crops. So over to you, Paul.
Many thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. And thank you also to everybody that's behind the screen. It's good to have you joining us this morning. So it'd be about 4 years ago, we launched Perfecting Potatoes Together, a BASF initiative. There's 2 strong thinkings behind that. The first was, as Alex already mentioned, there was a gap that was forming when the AHDB potatoes was being voted on and then ultimately broken apart, taken down. And there's a gap that formed there. And as Rebecca's already mentioned as well, in terms of collaboration, we were looking to fill, or partly fill, I think it's too big a gap for us to fill, but we can help there. Fill with collaborations that we're doing. So we're operating with key industry influencers, key industry organisations. Example today with the James Hutton Institute, with GB Potatoes, and delivering webinars, delivering our newsletter to try and help people through and to disseminate some of that information, because we all know information is king. The other part was our pipeline. We had, I believe we still do have, strongest pipeline for potatoes within the industry, and what we can see here on the left is the introductions that we've had since Perfecting Potatoes started. So we've introduced a new potato tuber treatment, Potato Honesty Pack. It's has the strongest label out there of any tuber treatment, and also can be used on all potatoes, where not all tuber treatments can, it's fair to say. Berlanti, it is a product currently focus more on maize in terms of the where we're pushing it this season. However, it does have potatoes on the label and a very strong option when it comes around to Alternaria. The third one down there, Prevest. As Rebecca said, I've been in the industry for more than 30 years. I think it's 32 years now. In that time, I've never seen a product, like product, come to the market and be so important in terms of what it's delivered and the timing of its delivery, as Prevest has done in 2024. There's a number of challenges with us. There's almost certainly a lot more challenges coming, and Prevest has helped to enable growers to meet those challenges. I have some more slides that follow, so I won't say any more about that at this point in time. Next, please. So looking at where we are in terms of the pipeline going forward, we have another late blight fungicide coming. It should be worth saying in terms of these introductions, we're looking at these coming within the next 5 years, all of them, subject to approval. So another late blight fungicide coming, also bringing the non-clashing characteristic that we've seen with Prevest, which being particularly useful when we're looking to manage the number of QIIs, OSBPIs, CAAs, and actually following manufacturer guidance, which we need to in terms of protecting crops and also maintaining chemistry to be able to fight against the ever-increasing challenge of these new genotypes coming through. BASF 656, a new herbicide. Yeah, we've got challenges with blight. We've got challenges coming ahead with weed control as well. And this is going to be, I think, a very useful tool, a team player, because I see increasingly weed control for potatoes being a team approach. And having both root and shoot uptake can be particularly useful in the conditions like we're getting now, particularly over here in the east, where dry means that the root uptake is almost certainly non-existent for most. Really excited about Exalion. It's going to be a new benchmark with regards to managing sucking and piercing pests in potato crop and other crops. We're doing a lot of work there, working with some key organisations in terms of how we manage virus, or how this product can help to manage virus, but also working with other modes of action in terms of conventional chemistry, but also bringing integrated crop management into these programs and demonstrating the value that it can all bring. BASF 517 is a natural transition. UK has a unique formulation for laser. The rest of Europe has an adjuvanted formulation, and it's a natural transition, so that we have one product line. Lastly, a little bit tongue-in-cheek with regards to still coming, BASF 480. It's a biological for helping in the management of wireworm. I joined BASF over 10 years ago. It was coming then. There's been some transitions in that time, but I think the key thing is that we haven't lost it. It is still on the cards to come through, and helping again to fight that challenge of wireworm going forward. So moving on to some Prevest. I say Prevest came to the market last year, being the first season. A key part of this product is the unique chemistry within it. There is nothing else that is a code 45. There is nothing else that is a code P07. What this means is this product doesn't clash with any of the other chemistries out there. So when you're building a program to protect the crop, but also increasingly we need to think about protecting chemistry as well. As already been mentioned by David, protecting genetics too. These are all different modes of action, and while we appear to have an abundance of them a few years ago, I think there was 12, 13 that was on the identified as being having activity against Phytophthora in David's slide. Actually, we're seeing an ever quickening of resistance developing. So we need to use chemistry better. In terms of where it fits in the program, the chemistry works with the plant as it grows. We've got host plant induced defense there, also called systemically acquired resistance, and say it works with the growing plant. So you put it on early. Rapid canopy is fantastic because of the true systemicity we have there, best protection of new growth. The only truly systemic product that doesn't have the potential resistance in the population. So It simplifies the program. Not being the CAA, QII, OSBPI, it is an ideal alternation partner between those within the program. It can leave those chemistries for elsewhere in the program. So, for example, QII chemistry is particularly strong at tuberblite. Actually, if you've already used it early in the program or a proportion of it, so it limits what you can use at the end, actually, that's going to be a problem for you potentially. And one of the things with the blight program is we have a plan, but ultimately the year decides what we do. Next, please. And lastly, both of the actives have multiple modes of action. They help protect each other. Having multiple modes of action also helps in terms of resistance management. This product is regarded as low resistance risk. I have a phrase that top drawer is where you put your best things, and that is a good place for any product to be. And consistently, I've been trying this since 2019, Prevest has been in the top drawer. Next, please. So just to give you some pictures of top drawer products, I would have Infinito there, I'd have Ramman Top there, Reavers would have been there, subject to resistance. I think that's hard on Infinito, but what we have in the top drawer is sometimes you're at the top of it, sometimes you're middle. You vary, but you're still in the top drawer. Prevest there, as you can see, doing a fantastic job. These pictures are taken for me. It's fair to say it's Ocken by Rory Bain. They're not my pictures. Next, please. So a key part of this product is the formulation. We have clashing biochemistry in this product. We have a lipophilic and a hydrophilic. It's a bit like oil and water. They do not want to mix, do not want to remain stable naturally. And when you look at that formulation, 52.8% of it is active. So 47.2% of it is something else. It's the formulation. That is really important to get a stable formulation, but also to get these actives to where they need to be in the plant, on the plant, to be able to do what they need to do. So formulation is key here. Next, please. We have a Syntec formulation. And again, this has helped to deliver a proven synergy. So this isn't just words. This has been proven. You run results through what's called the Colby formula, and that confirms whether you've got an additive effect or whether you've got a synergistic effect. There is a genuine synergy with Prevest between the actives. 1 + 1 = more than 2. You can see the application rate there, up to 3 applications to a crop. So an ideal partner going through rapid canopy into the first part of stable canopy, and while the crop is growing. There's a window there, 5 to 10 days for intervals. Aim for 7. It gives you flexibility subject to the weather. Next, please. So looking at my phrase top drawer, these are my cumulative blight slides. In essence, the colour represents the amount of blight at an assessment, and yellow, the one at the top, is the last assessment, and as you can see the untreated on the left there, number 1, blue was the first assessment. Number 3 is Infinito, number 4 is Ramman Top, number 2 is our Prevest. I would have both of those products as top drawer products. Prevest has been up there with them consistently whenever I've tried this product. Good place to be. Next, please. So just to finish on Prevest, we've had our first season. We've had comments back from people using it. So it is the only truly systemic product with activity against all late blight genotypes. It is the best product because it has true systemicity for rapid canopy protection. Having said that, it works with the plant as it grows, so it can be extended beyond the rapid canopy part of the program. We've got a phrase fire break. Because of the non-clashing chemistry, it gives you a clean break in the chemistry that you're using and also what you're going to use. So by putting a Prevest in the program, that will free up whatever you may have put there, which probably would have been either a CAA, an OSBPI, or a QII. They can be used elsewhere, but also manufacturer guidance advises that a number of these chemistries are alternated anyway. There's only one other product that I can recall that will do exactly this, that gives this clean break. Down the bottom there, it simplifies in the planning. When you're building a program now, to follow all the guidance, and we need to follow guidance because we're seeing chemistry break in Europe, and when we look back at what people were doing in Europe, it wasn't following the guidance that we have now. So we do need to follow the guidance, and this helps. It helps you build a sustainable program for this crop, but also for future crops. And lastly, down there, my phrase top drawer. It's a good place to be. It has very strong efficacy. It's been proven over multiple seasons, so it will deliver, as I say, my standards there. Weavers would be in there before resistance, Infinito, Randman Top, our Percos and our Zampro DM. I'd also put there. How you rate those? This product is on a par, at least with those. It's in the top drawer. And to finish, one more slide from me. Some more pictures. These were taken from Eurofins in 2023. You can see there Infinito, you can see Randman Top, proven top drawer products. And one click more, you then see Preves coming through. And actually, yes, what we have is a proven product. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and you couldn't have done that more perfectly timed if we had asked you to. So thank you ever so much for that interesting insight. While I've got you unmuted, obviously we are facing a very dry spell at this moment in time, and we're all doing rain dances in the hope it comes. Is it still worth investing in a product such as Prevest when you've got a dry spell such as this?
I think that what we've got to do is we've got to look beyond the weather. What we know and what David has said is if we're chasing the game, it is incredibly difficult to catch up. And what we have seen in the past is that also predisposes chemistry for being broken. The best protection from all products out there is being ahead of the disease, being ahead of the challenge. And while you can look at saving a little bit of money, the cost that will be incurred trying to catch up will probably be significantly more if you can. At the end of the day, the last thing you want is blight in your crop, because you want to have the best quality crop that you can get going into store, particularly, and then you can have the luxury of being able to choose when you sell it, because if you've got to sell it at a particular point in time because there's maybe an issue in there, maybe there is some blight in there, then you are going to probably be selling it when other people are, and the price will be down. I think the other thing as well is when it feels like it's never going to rain again, it sort of feels like that in the east with me. Quite often it's when you've got to start building the ark. Don't want to bring doom and gloom weather-wise, but it tends to come in blocks of weather, blocks of rain, blocks of dry. We've had some dry. They do talk about weather changing with half term next week, bizarrely enough.
Thank you, Paul. And certainly we saw that from David's slide when he showed the different maps over the last year. Definitely a very different weather pattern. Well, thank you all for our speakers. We're now going to go to the Q&A. So if you'd like to ask some questions, do pop it into the Q&A box. We've got a few come in. So my first question that's come in is going across to David. So David, you talked a lot about blight and strains. What's the difference between lineage and genotypes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do tend to use the terms a bit interchangeably and probably shouldn't. A clonal lineage is it's formed once. It can only be formed once. It comes from a single mating of two blight populations as an A1 and A2 mating type. When they come together, they form a new strain, a new lineage, a new clone. And a clone is, in essence, the same as Maris piper. You know, it's the same clone which has been developed and propagated vegetatively through decades. In that case, a clone is the same in potato blight. So, but there is variation within a clone. In the same with potatoes, there are off types of Maris piper which we try and remove through inspections. We don't do that with blight, obviously, so blight just goes there, and it's a form of blight with an identical genetic fingerprint, but can change over time, and it's the same strain. I think I try not to use the word strain. I must say clone on clonal lineage and subclonal variants, but in essence, they're more similar to each other than they are to the other colours there. I hope that clarifies it in some way.
Thank you, David. It does. Thank you so much. The next question that's come in is over to yourself, Alex. So in the past, AHDB did a lot of work with the markets and were able to demonstrate the trends and gave insights. Will GB Potatoes be supporting that market insights, or how will you be working with the industry?
Another good question. So part of the residual levy funds project is for bridging the gaps in the market information. So we will be looking to do some of that work, or do that work to some extent. However, there is going to be a severe limit to what we can actually achieve with the funds that are available there. Fundamentally, we will do the work that our members want us to do. So if our members are clamouring for or asking us for work on market insights, then that is work that we will produce and make available to our members if we have sufficient members asking for it to give us the funding to do it. At the moment, that isn't the case. So the avenue that we are exploring it through is the residual levy funds. But as I say, there will be a limit to what we can achieve with that.
Great. So the key message there is, if you want it, get involved and find out about GB Potatoes.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Paul, the next one in for you. Advice on Mancozeb replacements in blight programme. What are you recommending? What are you advising?
I don't think there will be a direct Mancozeb replacement, it's fair to say. A genuine multi-site, I think, is being really valued as we are seeing resistance developing, and maybe that's part of the reason why we don't have the same challenge with resistance, although we do alternate far better in the UK than Europe. In terms of a replacement, Aprivest is a very strong product. It's standalone rather than being more of a mixer that you would have with Mancozeb, because of the multiple modes of action that you get from both of those actives. And again, those, like Mancozeb, the chemistry doesn't clash with anything else, so you can put it in the program, and what you need to watch is the number of itself that you're putting in the program, it's fair to say. Whereas Mancozeb also brought Alternaria, so looking at Alternaria going forward, we have challenges with even fewer modes of action. It's going to be interesting what happens there. So as I say, what would we use? We've got to use more chemistry, more sensibly, which means more mixes. I don't think there is a replacement for Mancozeb.
Thanks, Paul. And that leads us probably nicely onto the next question that's come in for you, David. So obviously you've got a wealth of experience. You've seen the blight strains, blight pathogens change quite a lot in your time monitoring it. Are we seeing particular factors, particular traits that are consistent, and other things that as growers we should be doing differently?
Yeah, good. It's always good to look on the long term, isn't it? I think the messages are the same, which is stopping it getting into the crop in the first place, and keeping on top of it, as Paul was just saying there. And if you don't, I think what this has shown the last few years were these new resistance issues, and frankly, we had no resistance issues apart from metal axle in the past. So we always thought blight was fairly immune to these problems, but because there's been a focus on, especially in continental Europe, to be fair, on blocking products and exposing exposing the pathogen population long term to the same product, that is always a dangerous scenario which we need to avoid. And the same thing can happen in a scale within a season. So if blight gets away from you and you try to apply a single product with a single site, and as we've just heard, Mancozeb with its multi-site is disappearing, that single site is vulnerable. So I think the message is keeping tight, making sure blight doesn't get away, because if you're firefighting blight, then you're firefighting a huge population. I showed some stats in presentations earlier in the years. I mean, 1.5 billion spores per week from 1% disease cover. So that potato blight, that potato field I showed with severe blight at 40%, you imagine the number of billions of spores you're producing, and every one of those spores that is being exposed to the product has a mutation which is going to cause problems to you downstream. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that this burst of new clones with new problems because of exposure to product. So it's really about mixing, making sure we're using the right combinations. And just while I've got the mic, I just also want to acknowledge them. I should have mentioned GB Potatoes, and thanks, Alex, for really pointing that out. We wouldn't have the new website without that funding from GB Potatoes. So it's been key to funding the in-house staff here, our data management staff, to do that. So it's really, you know, it's really important moving on. So thanks for that.
Thanks, David. Thank you all for the questions coming in. There's quite a few, and apologies, we do only have one more minute. I'm going to throw the very last one over to Alex as a grower, just for your insight. Alex, do you see a future where more biological products are used in your blight programme and to combat and aid fungus efficacy?
The simple answer is yes. I think if the products are there and they work, then we will use them. There's no question about that, as long as they're authorised, of course. So yes, I look forward to that day.
Very good, thank you, Alex. Well, I did promise we would finish on time, and I think I'm on the clock, so I will wrap up very quickly. But a big thank you to David, Alex and Paul for all of your presentations and your time this morning. Thank you to everybody who has joined online. It's been brilliant to see the questions coming in and so much engagement. A few final housekeeping: if the webinar was recorded, and you'll be sent a link to watch it afterwards. And as Nat alluded to, there is an exciting tour coming up that you can enter a competition for. So if you haven't registered for the newsletter, there'll be a link into that webinar recording that you can connect with. If you provided your basis number points, you'll be able to now claim those points for your CPD. And without further ado, we're all off to do some rain dancing, hopefully, and wish you all a very good season ahead. And thanks for joining us today.